Okay, so well, I'm Suzi Kelley, and I am the owner of Suzi's Lavender, and I'm here today. I'm super excited to have my own son, Hudson, who is working on the design team of the company, interviewing me today. Just some questions regarding, what it was like when I was a kid, and some other things that kind of led me to where I am today. So I'm ready if you're ready, Hud.
Yeah, that was a good introduction. Yeah, so I'm part of the marketing team at Susie's, and so we thought we'd just do this whole conversation. Um, yeah, so just to get started with, I think that something that often influences people a lot is where they grow up, and you happen to live in this similar region, more or less, from where you grew up in Oregon, but you grew up in Eastern Oregon, so maybe you could say something about growing up in Eastern Oregon. What was that like?
Yeah. Eastern Oregon is the dry part of the state. I grew up in the Blue Mountain area and La Grande, Oregon, and that area is fairly remote compared to the larger metropolitan area like Portland, where I am today. And so, as a kid growing up in Eastern Oregon, we had a lot of freedom. Back in the day, we had bikes to tear around on, and we raised horses. We lived on a farm slash ranch. It was kind of both a farm and a ranch, and my sister and I raised horses. So we had a lot of responsibility out there, watching our baby colts being born and training them up uh, to enjoy them as adult horses. We were out wild harvesting quite a lot. We lived on a mountain where there was elderberry and huckleberry and all kinds of wild things that could be eaten. And basically, what we learned was what was safe to eat and what wasn't. A little experimenting there. And then we basically just had to be home for dinner. So we had a really free lifestyle growing up. We lived outdoors, absolutely spent
Yeah.
hours outside. My father was a forester, your
Hmm.
grandfather. And, a big outing for us would be just to go up into the woods and watch dad work and with my brothers who were helping him and spend a lot of time running along the logs and running out into the forest. And, I think our first pet was a chipmunk.
Oh yeah, because you guys would
Yes.
lure them in.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Our dog would actually help us catch them, and he had a really soft mouth. So if he would catch the chipmunks, we could take them home and pretend like they were our pets.
Huh.
And then on the next excursion to the woods, it was our duty to let those go. But we had a good time being raised out in more of a wild kind of place where, yeah, we had a tremendous amount of freedom. We learned how to swim in the rivers. And in the winter, we learned how to skate, ice skate on those same frozen rivers.
What about
We learned how,
the?
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to ask about the time that Danny built a cabin up behind the house. 'Cause that kind of gives a
That,
really good picture of what you guys got up to.
yeah, and that wasn't the first try. We initially dug a hole in the ground, a deep hole, and we tried to build an underground house. And we accomplished that pretty well, but we didn't seal the roof, and one day it flooded completely. So then before I knew it, he had us convinced to drag all these logs and all this lumber up this gigantic hill to this premium spot. So he had a view.
Yeah, I
I think
remember
it
we
was late.
actually didn't we go and check that site out when we were up there not long
Yeah,
ago?
yeah, there's not a whole lot left of it, but that's a
Yeah.
pretty good example of how I grew up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Um, so I remember you just mentioned that you were kind of back in those days. You just kind of, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just lost the microphone.
Oh,
Um,
shoot.
yeah, so back in those days, I think you said that you kind of got into doing some foraging and collecting of berries and stuff like that. To you, it
Yeah.
probably was just, it was just normal. I mean, you ate what you found in the woods, and but as you got older, you probably did those lessons kind of carry along with you into your love of plants and because growing up, you've always had a garden everywhere we lived, and you put just tremendous amount of
Yeah.
time into it. And then the
Yeah.
lavender, so
Yeah, I think, if you grow up out in the natural world, you just automatically identify closer to plants. We actually spent a lot more time out with each other and exploring than we did in town with other kids. And, also my parents, our parents, your grandparents taught us how to identify plants, the ones that were safe, and then how to smell the difference between conifer trees. Like in the bark of a pine tree, it smells like vanilla. And so we just knew how to find different things out there. And yeah, I do think it influenced me because it was a natural connection to the natural world that I just always felt comfortable with.
hmm,
Sometimes felt more comfortable out there than I might in the city. So growing up that way, we learn a lot about how to live when we're young, and that
yeah.
tends to wear off, and kind of stick with us as we when we get older. So, and of course, we harvested elderberry, and Mom had us all set up to know when to do that, so that we could make the salve, the family salve, once a year.
Wow. So you learned
Yeah.
that process. How old were you? And I actually never asked that. How old were you? Do you remember when you first like made that?
Well, yeah, I believe that when we got involved, I was more like third or fourth grade. And by the time I was fifth or sixth grade, we were kind of on our own. Mom would crack the whip and out we'd go to get that elderberry. We hauled it in for her so she could prepare the fire, and she could prepare all of the Canada balsam and the pine pitch, and those were the resins that we used. And then all of the oils she would have lined up, and she'd have her scales and everything out like a little scientist, just so that when we got back, she was ready. We were all ready to go.
Wow.
So it's possible that she taught me a lot about being a scientist as well, that I really wasn't aware of at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know that she measured it all out and everything like that. That's pretty cool.
Right.
Um, and so I guess as life went on, you moved away from there and became a teacher for 30 years, 30 more than 30 years.
Hmm.
And then you were in Nebraska and you're trying to grow lavender in a region where it was pretty difficult, right? How did you even get
Very.
into lavender though? Like, I don't know if I even asked you that before.
Yeah. I had been exploring the therapeutic properties of essential oils about 15 years ago. I got interested in it, and I loved the color blue, and I may have landed on lavender by mistake. But when I saw the plant itself, I thought, man, I'm going to grow this stuff. I'm going to grow this stuff, and I'm going to figure out everything I can about it. And that's when I set up the town trial. We had 13 different varieties and 4 different soil types. And I have
Hmm.
that all in my garden journal. It just shows how I set that all up. And it turns out that lavender will knock pain down. So I discovered that when I made my very first salve, and I had lavender in it because I love the smell. Oh my gosh, I'm like, what is different about this salve? The pain is gone. So lavender will increase inflammation and decrease pain. That was my first lesson on, how do you build a product that can help yourself and other people. So I basically got started there in town before we moved to the farm in Nebraska, and ended up transplanting the stronger plants to the farm. But that's how I got started, was just falling in love with the color and the smell, and then digging a little deeper, doing my research.
Huh. That's really cool. I think some people, that's interesting. You came from it, from just loving that plant, but I
Yeah.
guess that really speaks to your kind of penchant to be a gardener in general. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and do you hope to have lavender growing in mass again? I guess you can go up to Vashon now to see that,
Yeah.
but do you hope to
Well,
have?
right now we have about 50 plants in the ground, and we're scoping out one little area to do this summer. Right now, with my condition with arthritis, I like to keep things manageable, and the
Yeah,
farm is not as manageable. And the other thing I learned after giving up the farm and selling that was that working cooperatively with other people was really magic.
Yeah.
getting to know people, learning from them, harvesting with them. Right now, we're working with yet another farm up in Washington for the distillate and for some of our hydrosols. And it's just really been a community building kind of exciting thing, and that I wasn't expecting. So yes, I have my own lavender. It's just enough to get me by for culinary kinds of needs. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can still keep it, and then I have it hanging all over the house, of course. But I love lavender, and I always like to share my love of that very nurturing and therapeutic oil.
Yeah. That's great. Um, so maybe you could talk a little bit. I guess one of the coolest things I've kind of felt come about with the company in the last
Yeah.
couple of years is the collaboration between you and Vashon, Lavender Hill Farm on Vashon Island with Kathy McNeil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I found that farm because I'm obsessed with Google Maps, and I was looking around on Vashon Island because I had a friend who wanted to go there, and I found lavender plants in the ground from satellite.
That's
Did I ever
great.
tell you that?
No.
Yeah, I saw this little farm and I could see the little rows of purple plants, and I thought those are obviously lavender. And so I looked up what it was, and it was Kathy McNeil.
That's crazy. Wow.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about the hydrosol you get from them and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And
Kathy grows a great variety of just gorgeous plants on her farm. And at Lavender Hill Farm on Vashon Island, we go up once a year at least for the harvest. And the process of steam distillation of the plants, you'll see in pictures if you look online how that's done. And then there's a byproduct. And the byproduct is the hydrosol. The hydrosol is an emulsion of water and oil. So when you think about it, water and oil don't mix, and the oil is lighter, so it sits on top. And in this process, it emulsifies it and brings it together. So that I was drawn to immediately because of my super dry skin. I thought, wow, I'm going to try this on my skin. This is all organic. How can it get better? It's unfiltered. It's organic. It has all the terpenes, all the chlorines, or the chlorophylls. The goodness is there from the plant. So we started working with Kathy after the year that you were there, just asking her, is there any way I can buy this from you, and how much can I get? And then we 1 year and did some planting for her, and just developed a really great friendship. And now it's just an annual thing. We talk to each other a couple of months out, and we're ready to go. And we're always getting more hydrosol from her, and also wreaths and stems of lavender during the season.
cool. Yeah, I remember it's actually really fun to go there. If anyone who sees this video lives in or listens to the interview, lives in the Northwest, it's Vashon Island. It's across from Seattle. Lavender Hill Farm is the name. And when I was working there, people would show up, and it was so funny. They would just sit down on a bench, and they'd look out the lavender plants, which kind of go down to this little cove, an inlet in a bay. And they would say, I feel so relaxed. Yeah, which is, it's great because, I mean, people need that.
Yeah.
And speaking of that kind of thing, so you're a teacher for over 30 years. What kind of lessons or things that you took from teaching have you applied to your company, in terms of understanding people, what they kind of like to have in life and things like that?
Yeah. Well, there are probably more things than we have time for that one learns from teaching. There's so many facets to it, but I think the biggest takeaway is community. Learning how working together as a community, a learning community, is very beneficial. Learning how to work with other people, especially how to listen, and how to show that you're present. All of those things a teacher is either really good at or not so great at. And I think students can benefit from having a teacher who's a great listener, who gets right in there. I learned how people love to be active and not complacent. I learned how people don't really always enjoy being a spectator, that being active is a better way to learn. I was able to do some pretty crazy things with the freedom I had as a teacher with students that I felt were beneficial to their ability to learn about themselves. We worked on being peaceful in the classroom. We worked on being unstressed by the way we held ourselves. We had 5 minutes of just quiet time at the beginning of every hour. And I feel like I tried to promote a humanistic kind of, we're here, we're all human, everybody makes mistakes, let's learn together. So I think it helped me build a philosophy around my life, what it is to be human, and what is the journey that we're on. Yes, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to learn, and we're going to do it together.
Totally. Yeah, I can definitely see that in the way that it comes through with the warmth that you kind of show about the company.
Oh, thank you.
All the products and stuff. Yeah, for sure. And, we're getting close to the 20-minute mark. So I was just thinking that maybe you could talk a little bit about some goals or some ideas for the future. What's kind of going on next for you and for the company?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, it's a good question. And this is like a never-ending love of life for me. If I were to write a book, I would have to say I'm already doing it, because this is kind of the story of my life. And I think everyone has a story to their life as they live their life every day. For me, our goals are really embracing communities of people who are looking for, first of all, of course, amazing skincare products at an affordable price that everyone can benefit from because of the way that we formulate, to help circulation, to help decrease inflammation, to keep our skin moisturized and calm. And calm being an operative word in how I formulate. I see myself helping people learn how to access calm in their daily lives, in their skincare routines, in their daily rituals. And if I had one big hope for the future, it would be to continue to give back to natural science, probably different places where people go outdoors. I'd love to be able to promote outdoor schools from K through 12, and traditionally outdoor schools are mostly 4th and 5th and 6th graders. I want to see kids outdoors K through 12, and I'd love to be able to subsidize and write scholarships for those kids, as well as continuing to offer support to the women's shelters. And that takes money, and it takes time, and it takes real passion. But we started in a small way doing that when I first started back in Nebraska. And so as we can afford to do that, I want to promote as much as I can in that way each and every new season that we're here. So those are big goals for me. They feel real because they're local. And that to me is also really important. I would love to be able to help the world, but the world is out of my hands. Local is not so much. It's closer, and I feel like we can really build strong communities, even through a skincare company, by just how we present ourselves and then invite people to enjoy. For example, we have a really great thing coming up for Mother's Day with journaling, and we're handing out free journals. Like this is one right here. And I actually started writing my own. We want to promote people writing and squiggling and painting and drawing and just expressing and embracing their time in this life. And so I am really excited for the future of Suzi's Lavender and my connection to my community, which is growing.
Yeah. And then one last question about kind of being connected with the bioregion that you're in, the Pacific Northwest. Like, what is environmental? This is a big question again, but what does environmental stewardship mean to you? And like, how is that found? Because you were a science teacher, so you
Yeah.
studied ecology, and then also you have this intimate emotional connection. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, that again is a really important thing about being local is we can have local impact on how we address climate change. We can have local impact on how we build communities to create an opening for people to speak to one another about these impending issues with flooding and drought and forest fires. And just even, I mean, I have sort of a sense of this pressure that's on the natural world today. And I can actually feel the pressure when I go out on the trails and I see so many more people and you know, suited for the outdoors, but not really if you're carrying a liter of pop with you. And I think to myself, why are we here in this natural place? Let's really revere. And that part of my, you know, my growing up was taught to revere the natural world. Let's be sure that we're all out here living this life, loving these natural places, but doing our best to be aware of the issues, driving less, carpooling more, taking the bike or walking, and making sure people are out enjoying these beautiful places because let's just, you know, admit it, if we don't have a relationship with it, we don't care about it. So that's the bottom line. We want to
Yeah,
develop relationships with the natural world because then we will protect them. We will protect the natural resources of water and air and soil.
cool.
It's a
Yeah,
big
I'm.
job and we all have to pitch in.
I think that if we can see that each person's commitment and energy helps, it can
Right.
feel like we're getting somewhere. If you look at a mountain, you think, I have to climb that whole thing alone. That can feel daunting. But I think focusing on the small things every day, and it does take some effort, but I think it's absolutely worth it. And yeah, so thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard a person say once, are we not of interest to one another? And that's powerful because that's
Yeah,
the key is even though we have great differences, we have so much in common. And that's the bridge we need to build.
yeah, absolutely.
So,
Well,
well,
let's,
thanks, Hudson.
yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. Um, build bridges, not walls.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but yeah, so I think that's about it. And thank you
Sounds
so
great.
much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so
Um,
much. It's really been fun.
yeah, I hope people enjoy listening to the interview. And
Yeah.
um, I guess we could just say goodbye really quick.
Yeah.
So
Thanks
I'll
so much,
stop.
Hudson.
Yeah, I'll stop recording and then we can catch up a little bit.
Sounds great.
Okay.